Yo, what's up everyone? It's your boy Dark King and welcome to the third installment of our Gauntlet guide. In today's installment, we'll be looking at the Wind Gauntlet. The Wind Gauntlet is kind of unique amongst the gauntlets. It doesn't do a lot of damage and is much better used for mobility. This makes the Wind Gauntlet a staple in most players' inventory. Without it, it can be a lot harder to move and people can hit you much more easily. But first, let's jump into the spells and sorceries of the Wind Gauntlet. First, we'll look at the Wind Gauntlet spell. The startup time is kind of slow, as you can see, and it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. But once the first spell is fired, you can hold down the fire button and it can fire up much faster. However, you have to watch out for this, as it can drain your mana cost very quickly without you noticing. This is kind of good for ending fights, because this doesn't do a lot of damage, but it can be very easy to hit at close range. If people are really low and you just kind of want to finish them, and you can't really hit them with whatever other gauntlet you're using, just bust out the Wind Gauntlet and use this spell really quickly. This spell doesn't have a lot of range. As you can see, it fades out rather quickly, so mid to short range is when you're going to be using it. You're never going to be trying to snipe people with it. The coolest thing about this spell, though, is not its damage output. As I mentioned before, the Wind Gauntlet is mostly used for mobility, like this. When you do this, it'll send you straight up into the air. You can't use your jumps afterwards, but you can use a Featherfall rune or a Blink rune while in the air. This is an easy way to gain height, and with other gauntlets such as the Flame Gauntlet or the Ice Gauntlet, you can get height and snipe at people very easily. However, when people use this gauntlet, they have a tendency to keep wanting to be in the air, so they'll do this, use their other spell, do this, use their other spell, and not have time for their mana to recharge. So mana can run out very quickly, and you should watch for this. Another way a lot of people like to use this spell is to jump first, and then use it. You get a little more height this way, and it can save you in certain situations. You can also use the spell on the way down to jump right back up. Now let's look at the Wind Gauntlet sorcery. This sorcery has very weird properties. If people are in the center of it, they'll take about 5 damage per tick, but it's very easy to run away. However, if you're standing still, the wind sorcery will just drag you in, so you move slower while around it. This sorcery is not very good for damage output, but again, since you run out of mana really quickly with this amulet, it can be nice to use quickly or when someone's up against the wall. Now that we've looked at the spell and sorcery, let's look at the damage difference and the mana differences between the rarities on each gauntlet. First, we'll start with the damage. The common Wind Gauntlet does 10 damage, the uncommon Wind Gauntlet does 12 damage, the rare Wind Gauntlet does 13 damage, the epic Wind Gauntlet 14, legendary 15. The Wind Gauntlet is unique in its mana cost. It doesn't change between the rarities on each gauntlet. It is always 13. This means you have to worry less about picking up rare Wind Gauntlets, but as always the damage makes a difference, and also they look cooler, so I'd always look for them in game. Now let's look at some of the interactions between the Wind Gauntlet and the other gauntlets. The first combination we'll look at is the Stone Gauntlet and the Wind Gauntlet. These spells and sorceries don't really have any interaction. You can't even really use the Wind spell on the Stone sorcery at all. The Stone Gauntlet spell has very limited interactions, and that doesn't really do anything. Firing the Stone spell through the Wind Gauntlet also doesn't add any special properties to the Stone spell. And using the Stone sorcery through the Wind sorcery doesn't add any extra properties to the Stone sorcery. However, just because these gauntlets don't interact directly doesn't mean they're not a good combination to run together. Doing this and slamming down with the Stone spell can also be a good way to switch things up. You can also fake a Stone spell and then use the Wind Gauntlet to cancel the animation and then land with the Stone spell. This can be very good because people will prepare for your Stone spell, and then it's a great way to mix up the timing. What a lot of people do to counter the Stone spell is jump over it or use a Wind Gauntlet of their own. So, if you mess up their timing and cause them to land, and you land after them, you can hit them with the Stone spell. Getting height with the Wind spell is also a great way to use your boulder, and it can give you a greater field of view as to where you're going to fire your Stone sorcery. Next up is the Wind Gauntlet and the Flame Gauntlet. These gauntlets also don't interact very much, but they do have a decent interaction between the Wind sorcery and the Flame spell. When using the Flame spell on the Wind sorcery, it causes the Wind sorcery to have much greater range and deal a lot more damage to the player. Since their spells are both projectiles, they don't interact a lot. The Flame sorcery and the Wind spell interact as so it's more of a defensive measure than an offensive measure. This can be good when you're fighting someone with the Flame Gauntlet and they put up the wall of flame to stop you from approaching. You can just cancel out their flame and approach. Or, you can just jump over it. The Wind Gauntlet combos very well with almost every gauntlet. In this case, using the Wind Gauntlet to get height and rain fireballs down can be very good. The fireball likes the visibility and the ability to fire over large spaces. Also, since you become very high, you can shoot a lot of spells on your way down. These gauntlets do interact, however it's more subtle. You have to experience it in-game to really know what it does, but I'll try and explain it my best here. On a basic level, these gauntlets are a good combination. Frost likes to snipe, Wind gives you height, bars. It's easy to use together. They don't directly interact, but they work as a good combination. However, the Wind Gauntlet does do well with the remnants of what the Frost Gauntlet leaves behind. Every Frost spell always leaves a trail of ice behind it. And when you use the Wind spell to jump, it breaks the ice, or when you use it on any remnants. If there's a player standing over it, and you break the ice where they're standing, it will cause them to become frozen. This is the same effect that occurs when you use the Frost sorcery on anyone around you. Since I use this combination, what I like to do a lot is use my Frost sorcery, and then jump to freeze them again, and then hit them with another Frost spell. This is the same interaction when using the Wind sorcery on the Frost spell remnants. It will break the ice, and anyone within this will become frozen, and you can then easily snipe them or hit them with the Frost spell. These interactions can make this combination very powerful, as it can be good at long range with the Frost spell and close range with the Frost sorcery and freezing. Next up, we got the Toxic Gauntlet and the Wind Gauntlet. This combination can also be very good, as raining down toxic orbs on people like this is a much better way than forward. It's easier to hit people because there's less spread on the way down from being in the air. The Wind spell can get rid of these leftover puddles. It causes a small cloud and then goes away. If you're running a Flame Gauntlet along with this combination, you can put these on the ground, switch gauntlets, do this, and then make a small Dragon Flame. This Dragon Flame does 20 damage per tick, just like the other one. This combination requires a bit more of a setup, but it can still be worth it for the damage. Similar to how the Wind spell makes the toxic puddles go away, it also makes the toxic sorcery go away. This is a good defensive move when someone shoots a toxic sorcery at you and you have the Wind Gauntlet. Again, getting height is very good for firing the toxic sorcery as well, because you have the visibility and you have much more range from up here. Boom. The toxic spell and the Wind sorcery do have an interaction. This interaction is similar to the Flame spell and the Wind sorcery. When using the Wind sorcery, you can fire the spell into it. Again, the Wind sorcery will gain a little more range and a little more damage. And last but not least, the final combination we'll look at is the Wind Gauntlet and the Lightning Gauntlet. These don't really have a lot of direct interactions, but again, they're still good to play together. Getting height, then using the Lightning spell, getting height, then using the Lightning sorcery can both be very good options. The spells don't interact because they're both projectiles. However, the sorceries do have a small interaction. The Wind sorcery and the Lightning spell have a similar interaction between the Toxic sorcery and the Lightning spell. When you use them together, it sends out a pulse that can cause players to become shocked when they get too close. The field of electricity lasts around it for a little while, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's just a visual effect. The Wind Gauntlet is a very versatile gauntlet and is played very differently from all the other gauntlets. As I mentioned before, the damage output isn't very good, but when used in addendum with all the other gauntlets as we've seen, it can be very powerful. Since using the Wind Gauntlet is very essential to winning games, what you'll have to do is develop a way of gauntlet switching. Most players like to run more than one gauntlet for damage output, whether it's because of range or just because of aim or what they like. What I do is I run Stone, Frost, and Wind. I keep my Wind in the right side of my inventory, my Stone or Frost in the left. That way, I can easily switch them whenever I want to. However, the timing on when you can switch gauntlets is kind of weird. It's not right after the animation ends. You have to kind of wait till you're at the apex of your jump for the Wind spell. Learning this skill is very valuable and will help increase your damage output. I would suggest for every player to try this and to keep a Wind Gauntlet on them at all times. Now, let's look at the class that goes with the Wind Gauntlet. It's called Tempest. The passive ability is called Updraft. It makes you immune to damage from the whirlwind and launch skyward when you're inside them. This is what it looks like. Boom. This can be a great scouting tool, however it leaves you vulnerable for other people to snipe you. First scroll we'll look at is Slipstream. This causes you to gain 10 mana and add 10 mana to your max mana while you're in the air. 10 seconds after touching the ground, this returns to normal. There will be a little timer above your mana bar that while you're on the ground. This doesn't reset when you go into the air, it's just as soon as you touch the ground. As you can see, my mana is going up when I'm jumping. When I stay in the air for longer, it goes up quicker. So, if I were to bounce on this, my mana could just keep going up. And it won't stop until you touch the ground. Now it's going to reset. This can make it so you can just spam your spells endlessly because you're gaining mana as you're doing it. The next ability we'll look at is Sudden Gust. After being in the air for a second, your sorceries will cool down faster while you continue to be in the air. As you can see, the timer now doubled, and it's going down much faster on that sorcery. And when I touch the ground, it returns to normal. The last scroll that this class has is called Squall. This scroll increases your spell damage for every spell cast in the air. However, when you touch the ground, all the stacks are lost. Level 2 makes the spell damage increase by 8% and max out at 40%. Slipstream 2 is a big increase from Slipstream 1 because you gain double the mana that you did before. This is what that looks like. You're now gaining 20 mana, 170, 190. And I'm just spamming away. But as soon as I touch the ground, it resets. And then Slipstream 3 is even crazier. You now gain 30 mana while you're in the air. If you jump up with this, you can literally just spam wind spells. And your mana will continue to go up. However, it maxes out at 310. So I guess kind of be careful, but at the same time, you don't really have to worry about it. And this effect lasts while you're on the ground for however many seconds the timer says. Squall 3 maxes out at 10% damage increase and a max of 50%. As you can see, this class favors playing in the air a lot. Jumping on your whirlwinds can be a very good way to do this. Using Boots of Leaping to get a triple jump, Featherfall rune, or Blink rune straight up can all be great ways to increase your damage, your mana, and the amount of sorceries you output. What this class attempts to do is to lessen your worry about running out of mana when using the Wind Gauntlet with other gauntlets. The Wind Gauntlet is the only gauntlet that doesn't have a special amulet for it, so you don't have to worry about that. That's going to be it for my Wind Gauntlet, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more Spellbreak content and some playthroughs. Make sure you get your gauntlet switching down. Always run Wind Gauntlet. I can't stress the importance of that enough. If you see any big streamer fight, they're always running Wind Gauntlet. It's just such a great mobility tool because you could use it with the Blink rune, with the Featherfall rune for height. You can use that Tempest class. It's just great. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.